It's the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome into Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Dog Nation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. And well, how the tables have turned. And no, I'm not talking about the new table in front of us. I find it very ironic that last week Jeff and I got the chance to share our own story about Drew Rosenhaus. And then what do you know, earlier this week on social media, we find out that 2026 D-line commit, Seven Cloud, is now being represented by Rosenhaus Sports. It just couldn't have come at a more weird time for us.
I mean, Kaylee, first of all, that is what everybody is talking about right now in Georgia football recruiting. It is really like, props to everybody out there. You got your social memes, you got your GIFs, you got your fun little parodies like he's gone or whatever. And it's just indicative of the world we live in today. The number for Seven Cloud, guys, I think it's probably going to get over $1 million because if you look at it, he's probably most likely. Let me remove some of that phrasing. If anybody's going to play a lot in 2026 out of this recruiting class on the defensive line, it's going to be Seven Cloud, and maybe his name, which is seven, and it's biblical and it's named for a lot of things in the Cloud family. Might be because it takes seven figures now to sign Seven Cloud in this class.
So he put this up on social media earlier this week. This is Seven Cloud on Twitter or X or whatever you like to call it, basically showing that he was now being represented by Rosenhaus Sports. And it's Rosenhaus Sports saying, "Welcome to the family, Seven Cloud." And now, having been at Jackson Cantwell's commitment ceremony where he told us that he wanted an agent that went for the jugular, I mean, if you're Kirby Smart in this position, you're probably having some deja vu about maybe some things that went down behind the scenes when it came to numbers and stuff. But, I mean, honestly, good for Seven Cloud because I think this goes to show how talented of a player he really is because Rosenhaus Sports is not picking up a player who's not going to amount to anything in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we kind of laughed about it, Kaylee, because like seven, does that mean seven figures? But listen to this. Seven Cloud, it's a great story. He was the guy that was committed to Georgia out of McEachern High School. Class of 2023, life took a detour. He had a knee injury. He dropped out of school. He got his GED. One of the things his late father always wanted him to do was wanted to see him play for Georgia. Recently, maybe a couple months ago, Seven Cloud shut it down. And now with Rosenhaus involved, he's going to get a max deal. He's going to get great representation. And perhaps in Kansas, maybe Kaylee and I need to be eating lunch somewhere to figure out what's exactly going on at the local barbecue spot or something like that. But I'm going to tell you there are a lot of storylines, which we'll get into today, about Georgia's, how it kind of completes its 2026 recruiting class. This is now a very big one, the retention of Seven Cloud. And I get you, Dog Nation. You're saying loyalty. It's not a Kendrick Lamar song. It's something else. It's about Georgia has been ride or die with Seven for forever, and now Rosenhaus Sports is involved. Part of me wants to say, also like Kaylee, good for the young man because he has went through a lot of hard times in JUCO ball to get to where he is. And really, Kaylee, I think if everything goes right for him next year, he could be a one-and-done player into the NFL.
Well, Seven Cloud is actually someone who's going to come up later in the show, so stick around for that. In the meantime, we'll show you what we've got coming up on Before the Hedges, starting with an update on the five-star linebacker, Tyler Atkinson. We'll have a Dog Nation exclusive interview with him. Then now that things have started to play out and 2026 guys are deciding their path, they're setting their official visits, what are those 5 remaining recruiting stories that are going to end up shaping the 2026 class? Then the Scavenger hunt official visits were last weekend, so we'll do a recap, who made a good impression on the Dogs, and then we'll do a continuation of our Next Generation series all about the 2025 class, and this time it's going to be all about the 5-star edge, Isaiah Gibson. But instead, let's start with the 5-star linebacker, Tyler Atkinson. I feel like there's just been so much going on over the last couple of weeks with Jared Curtis and Jackson Cantwell. We've talked a lot about Mark Bowman, and we don't want you to think that Tyler Atkinson's getting lost in the sauce because he's still a priority target. But he did set an official visit to Clemson for May 30th. It's looking like they may be emerging as a new leader for Atkinson. So where does this leave things with him and Georgia?
Interesting, Kaylee, because, Atkinson, somehow in the last, 2 or 3 weeks, Atkinson has went from Georgia was seen as the leader or as the team to beat and the formidable foe everybody's got to kind of overcome. And now I think that the sands have shifted a little bit where now it's Atkinson, perhaps. Georgia is jockeying to see how basically where they fit. There's Ohio State, there's Oregon, there's Tennessee, there's the Dogs, there's Clemson. And I'm going to tell you, it's kind of just like with Atkinson, you got to sit there and go, he told us some very interesting things. One, he has not a specific timeline, but he's got a general timeline. He's going to try to make his decision for the summer. Other things to take a look at there is, Kaylee, he's going to be a guy that isn't going to announce, I would anticipate, a whole slew of official visits. Maybe he might add some drama, some theater to that, and maybe just announce when he takes an official visit one by one. Look at the example right now. Just came out in the last 24 hours that Atkinson would take his first official visit to Clemson, and you don't really need to be a CSI recruiting scientist to know why. It's because Clemson preaches scarcity and exclusivity with its summer official visits. They usually only have one, and that's the first weekend in June or the last weekend in May. Fear not, Dog Nation, that does not mean an automatic qualifier. Lots of times in the past, major Georgia targets, KJ Bolden, for example, they went and saw Clemson first because that was the only time they could take an OV this summer to Clemson. And, of course, they didn't end up with the Clemson Tigers. But recently Clemson sent their whole defensive staff to meet with Tyler Atkinson, and that impressed him a lot.
Well, it's been a while since we heard from the five-star linebacker, so here's the latest with Tyler Atkinson in this Before the Hedges Dog Nation conversation.
It's just been a blessing to be here for my senior year and to be healthy and going ready for next year. So it's just been a blessing to be in the position I am right now and be able to have big decisions coming up soon. So I'm just thankful for where I'm at right now.
Have you locked in the OV schedule for the summer yet?
I'm still working on everything. Everything will get published soon, and we go from there.
Who has already locked in official visits so far?
Right. I ain't announced nothing yet.
Okay. Tell me which teams have put their best foot forward this spring in an effort to get that. Which team?
I'll say a lot of them.
Okay.
I'll say all of them that have been putting a lot of effort into it, especially Clemson. They've been putting a lot, Georgia, et cetera, different schools. So it's just been a lot. It has been a lot of schools that have been doing a lot of effort. Like all top schools, my top 10, they all been doing the way they're supposed to by recruitment and stuff. So it's just been a great experience to have a great conversation with the coaches and hear what they got to say and just keep building relationships. Clemson, with Coach Ben and Coach Dabo and Coach Allen, the DC, they just showed me a lot of. They show a lot of love, and the scheme they got right now with Coach Allen coming from Penn State, the scheme that he sees me playing it sounds very good. And just learning more about Clemson and what they can bring and how they can have a great impact on me and everything. So, yeah.
How big of a move did they make this spring with you, big picture in your recruitment?
They did a very big move. They had the whole defensive staff. I think yesterday or 2 days ago.
Okay.
I think it was yesterday. Yeah, they had a whole D staff yesterday, and just got to have a great meeting with them and talk with my family, and we just had a great conversation. So Clemson has been a very big jump.
Tyler, you got a number you're going to try to get it down to? Like, I know you're going to be purposely vague about specifics, but you got a number about how many you want to get it down to from your 10?
Not yet. Do
you have a timeline? Do you want to do it for your senior year?
Definitely in the summer. Definitely looking in the summer. I don't have a specific date what I'm looking for, but when I feel like that time is right, then that's when I'll start publishing and stuff and going out with my decision.
How was I think you ate dinner with Georgia yesterday. What was that like? What can a conversation with Georgia, how can it be different after as many times as you talk to them?
Coach Shu, our relationship is just it's a great relationship. But knowing him since 8th grade and just the relationship we have established. And then, I got to talk to Roquan Smith the other day, just to hear from him and the impact he had at Georgia. It just been a great, it just more stuff from Georgia keeps coming along, and the relationship with Coach Shu just keeps getting better and better each time we talk.
What did Roquan say?
We just had a great conversation. Just me and him. Just had a great conversation.
I think you had an Adidas meetup with Jalen as well. Like, that's another guy you could pick his brain about the Dogs. What did he have for you about potentially a career in Athens?
If y'all didn't hear the video, him and Michael Parsons was talking about number 11. Because he wore number 11 in Georgia, and Michael Parsons wore number 11 at Penn State. About coming to, we need you at Penn State at Georgia. Jay Walker said, I need 11 at Georgia. So just the relationship over there, it's just great. Me and Jay Walk, we talk. We got a good relationship. When we talk about ball and talk about regular stuff. So he's just a great guy overall.
Does the Georgia plan involve some Jalen Walker type duties and roles? Like, what's the plan they have for you schematically? Where will they deploy you?
They got me being all over the field when it comes to being that chess piece linebacker, rushing the quarterback, playing the run, being in pass drops. And so they just got me being that chess piece linebacker.
What you looking for? If you had to put your fingers on this thing, same keys, you have to read your keys as a linebacker. What are going to be the keys for your decision as you float through those officials?
It's definitely going to be the relationship piece. Definitely going to be the scheme. And it's just going to be just when I step on campus, it just feels like the right fit. This is where I want to go. So that's definitely that's where it's at right now. And there's more things that come to it, but those are the main things.
You mentioned Clemson, you mentioned Georgia. We know Ohio State has been coming. All the schools in how tight is it at the top for you? As you said, you don't know when you're going to make a decision. It's going to be whenever you have it, in here. How tight is it for you between those top schools?
All my top schools is very tight. Every school is 50-50. There's not one school higher than the other. Every school is 50-50 because the relationship piece has been great, And all the schools I'm looking at have the same plan, so it is very good.
Tyler Atkinson, really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
All right, I got to give some credit to Tyler Atkinson. He's had some wonderful media training. Every answer was crafted perfectly, especially the part at the end when he's talking about the things that are a priority for him, the relationships, the feel on campus, the scheme. But it seems like it is a very close race for him when it looked like the Dogs were the leader for the majority of the time. So what is it that Georgia has to do to pull this one out?
Yeah, Kaylee, I think it's interesting. That was kind of, I was wondering, what the common sense lady on the street might have thought when they were listening to that. First of all, Tyler Atkinson, whoever's helping him with his media training, yeah, that's pretty good. He's going up and up and up in that rating and ranking as well. So I think you kind of had a kernel of the truth there, which was Georgia had went from the team to beat to now Georgia's slugging it out, trading paint with a lot of other schools. I think the development will be huge. The relationships will be huge, but let's not kid ourselves, Kaylee. I expect now is the inside linebacker market, is the chess piece linebacker market, is that as big as it was for the five-star offensive tackle? I don't think so, but the market might be set by maybe a Tennessee, maybe Ohio State, maybe a Clemson, where that number is going to stretch a lot for Tyler Atkinson. Do I think he'd give Georgia maybe a little bit of a discount? Maybe, but like for all that, you see a young man that's going to be very calculated in his walk. I had to give him a follow-up. Like, do you think maybe he just told Roquan the deal and what was going on? Or like Roquan said, hey, man, I'll sponsor you in the collective or something like that to come wear number 3. I know that's what Dog fans would love for him to be saying, but that seemed like it wanted to remain private. There's also the conversations he's had with Jalen Walker. Listen real closely to that video again, and what's happening here is that Tyler has been described to Georgia's projection for him is they're going to use him like that chess piece linebacker. Ideally, which means, hey, you saw what Jalen Walker did. You saw where Jalen Walker got drafted. That's the plan. How does that work out? Again, just a huge recruitment for Georgia. I've said it before. I don't think Georgia's ideal 2026 recruiting class would be complete without Tyler Atkinson. Could it survive a Jackson Cantwell? Yes, but would Georgia be the same in this recruiting class if they don't add a Tyler Atkinson? I don't know, but as we're going to talk about later in our show, Georgia is coming up with plan Bs for a plan A in Tyler Atkinson.
Yeah, as you mentioned, in just a moment, we'll actually discuss what's the fallout, what happens based on the Tyler Atkinson decision, along with some other guys that will have an impact on how the rest of the class plays out. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger. And guys, the last couple of weeks, it's been some really wonky weather, thunderstorms at night. It gets really, really hot during the day, and it makes the motivation to have to go to the grocery store just a little bit more difficult. You want to stay in the shade, or as it gets nicer outside, spend more time outside. Don't spend so much time having to go to the grocery store. And the best way that you can maximize your time is by making use of Kroger Boost. Right now, you can try Kroger Boost for free for 30 days, and with that, you can save up to $1,000 per year with 2 times the fuel points, and of course, the best benefit of all is that free grocery delivery, so you just get more time out of your day. To find out more information, you can sign up at Kroger.com/boost. Again, that's Kroger.com/boost. So over the last 2 weeks, we've been talking a lot about domino effects. If this one thing happens or if it doesn't happen, how does it affect everyone else in that room, specifically for Georgia's 2026 class? So we're going to go through 5 recruits or position groups that'll help shape the way that 2026 plays out, and we're going to do it quick 5 style. So let's just go ahead and start with the guy that we were just talking about, of course, that being Tyler Atkinson, because there's a very real possibility that the race is tighter than we thought, and maybe he goes a different way. And it's really tricky with the linebacker position, because when you look at the previous classes, Georgia has signed a 5-star linebacker in the last 3. So it's like, can Georgia survive without a 5-star linebacker? Or in their case, could it be more beneficial to get 2 really good guys and be able to put that money elsewhere?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, Kaylee. That's the I would say that's the $1 million question. But I'm going to tell you this: if it's not Tyler Atkinson, Georgia will not continue that 5-star streak at linebacker. Most will hope that if it's not Tyler Atkinson, then Georgia maybe covered that position for a couple years with Zayden Walker, the number 1 linebacker out of last year, because Georgia's going to be churning through some linebackers in the next few years. They're going to say goodbye to C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson probably this year, and then maybe the next year Justin Williams and Chris Cole, and then Zayden, because it's like a pipeline. Georgia's always going to have backers, but I call them plan Bs. I don't know if that's exactly right, but Georgia's also working other positions there for the linebacker room, and one of those was Nick Abrams II. I really like him. He's out of McDonough School in Maryland. 4'5'7", 6'3", 83-inch wingspan. Kaylee, that's a longer arms than Jackson Cantwell. To put that into perspective, an inside backer for Georgia has longer arms. Kenneth Goodwin II, we've talked about him before. He's a guy out of California. He's the nephew of Georgia assistant running backs coach David Hill. And then another guy, which we're going to talk about also in this show, he, along with Abrams, were just in the official in town for official visits last weekend. Currently an Auburn commit, Shadarius Tootle, and reports are that internet chatter my buddy BA says that, and we'll get into this in a minute, Kaylee, but Tootle is still committed to Auburn, but Georgia is his leader. Georgia's his number 1 school. Get your 5th grade teacher to explain that to you or whatever. Talk to me like I'm a 5th grader with that one, but I find that interesting.
So similar to the linebacker position, the tight end room position has been one of those rooms that Georgia has recruited really well over the last few years, and it looks like their primary target for this class has been Mark Bowman, but now it's a humongous battle between them and Texas. Here's the thing, though, is when we were doing our top targets and just off the list, which we do later in the show, but like earlier in this year when we were doing that, there was a bunch of options in the tight end room. Yeah. But now those guys have committed elsewhere. So the options are more limited. If they don't end up getting Mark Bowman, is it as simple as you go all in on Caden Prothrow, or do you have to revise your plan?
It's very interesting, Kaylee, because especially after what you said, the room options have kind of depleted. Matt Ludwig, a really good guy out of Montana, he just committed to Michigan this week. Brock Harris earlier this year committed to BYU. Of course, he's going to take care of his LDS mission, but Now it's really Prothro and Bowman. And Kaylee, I know a lot of people are going to have some consternation about this topic. If Georgia doesn't pay for Tyler Atkinson or they don't win the bidding race for Mark Bowman, then what are you doing here? Like, where's the money going? Is it going to another position? Is it going to slide down? Here's what we know. Georgia is eagerly motivated, kind of like a silver-haired precious grandma at the slot machine in the casino. Georgia's going to be hitting that button over and over and over in the Mark Bowman sweepstakes. I don't think that they're going to be built to lose in Mark Bowman because I believe a lot of reports, a lot of analysts like myself think that overall best offensive player in the country, best offensive prospect in the country, that would be Mark Bowman. So I think Georgia's going to play to win, and then they've also got Caden Prothro there. But obviously, Kaylee, Texas is involved. Maybe a little bit of Ole Miss is involved. Oregon's involved there. He's going to take a bunch of his visits. He just took an OV to Ole Miss this past weekend, had his hotty-toddy moment and everything else. But I tell you, Kaylee, I'm just going to be deadpan honest. If you're building this Georgia class and you don't have Cantwell, you don't have Atkinson, and you don't have Bowman, the word disappointing will come into my mind, but also it would almost basically break the backs of those that are trying to see how Georgia can do the math and come up with the nation's #1 class.
So we told you guys that Seven Cloud would once again come up in the show because he's one of those players that whatever decision that he makes is going to have a humongous ripple effect, especially when it comes to the defensive linemen, because all around the 2026 defensive lineman is not as strong as we have seen in the past. In fact, there's only 2 defensive linemen that are currently ranked 5 stars by 247. So it's like Georgia needs this piece from Seven Cloud because those that are on the more talented side are already committed elsewhere. So if I'm Georgia, I'm giving Seven Cloud what he wants.
Yeah, this might be a case where the chief Georgia negotiator, whoever that is, maybe tries to retain his jugular and also compromises and finds a common ground because, Kaylee, it's pretty simple here. You're going to have basically Elijah Griffin next year, Xavier McLeod, but Georgia's going to churn a Christian Miller. They're going to lose a lot of their top player assets across the defensive line. And, of course, this time next year, the 2026 cycle, 2026 season, I think Elijah Griffin will be the #1 defensive lineman for Georgia in 2026. But then you've got to take a look at it. Who in this class can come in and play right away? Can get in the rotation, can get starters minutes or whatever. And I think the only person that Georgia's recruiting in the 2026 class is Seven Cloud. He's good, guys, but the main reason is he was originally slotted to be a 2023 class recruit. So, Kaylee, he would already be a senior next fall as it is. So he's got that grown man to him. He's got that 22, 23-year-old strength, body, development, everything else. And I think Georgia's plans for defensive line in this class, if they don't include Seven Cloud, that's also something that's going to leave folks scratching their heads.
Yeah, you need a negotiator to go like season 1 Olivia Pope on that contract.
Yeah, the other thing, Kaylee, is that suddenly if this Rosenhaus sports thing becomes a thing, maybe he could be cast as the biggest rival for Georgia in the 2026 recruiting class. It wouldn't just be.
It's not Oregon. It's not USC anymore. It's
Rosenhaus Sports, which is exactly what the guy wants, probably.
So when I was in Nashville this weekend, Cody actually asked me this question about what are some of those songs that you keep hearing, and one of them was, I think it's A Little Less Talk, A Lot More Action by Toby Keith. And I feel like when it comes to the running backs from the 2026 class, it's the opposite. It's been a lot of talk about the running backs and very little action. We've had so many conversations about the 5-star running back Savion Hyder, as well as Jay Lamar and Derek Cooper. And Georgia needs to sign at least 2 running backs in 2026 because you only got Bo Walker in this last class. This is one of those positions that you can't just sit around and wait for something to happen because people are going to spend money on a high-dollar running back. So you got to start being aggressive with this position in particular.
Kaylee, I got a take here, and maybe it's an educated, informed take here. Somebody's asked me, a lot of people on social media is asking, like, hey, where's that money that was intended to go to Jackson Campbell? Where's that going to go? I think it's going to try to be diverted, let me use that word, or channeled into trying to land Savion Hyder, the #1 running back in the country. So all of a sudden, all you dog fans that were wanting to, pound your fist or stomp the table about maybe not so great news about Tyler Atkinson and Mark Bowman going to be also, a very high stakes race there with financials involved. Well, what if I can entertain you with a little bit of Savion Hyder, the number one running back in the country? Kaylee, he is very special. He's number one with a reason. And I think Georgia, they're going to have to decide what they want to do. You're right. They only signed Bo Walker in the 2025 class. They brought a guy in, Josh McCrary, from the transfer portal. I think that's going to be a one and done kind of churn thing like Trevor Etienne was. So you got to sit there and say, who are the two? Is one of those guys going to be Jay Lamar? Can Georgia go Jay Lamar and Derek Cooper? Or is it Jay Lamar and Savion Hyder? Will they maybe take a third back? Maybe it's a guy like Will Rejecki out of Sequoia, a Georgia legacy inside the state. I think Georgia at running back becomes interesting because I've got to continue the narrative here a little bit, Kaylee. You want to surround Jared Curtis with playmakers. Here's a newsflash, guy. The marquee guy in this class is going to be Jared Curtis. He's going to be the highest rated guy in this class. So you've got to surround him with players to extend his talents, to make him better, to amplify Jared Curtis. And if you got the number one running back in the country, maybe the number one tight end in the country, then also he looks like he's cooking with a little bit more gas there.
So we did a whole segment on last week's show, but for those who didn't get the chance to watch, now that Georgia didn't get Jackson Cantwell, who's left on the offensive tackle board?
Yeah, kind of gets really intriguing there, Kaylee, because Malachi Lee out of Hawaii. We mentioned Ikene Ogboko out of North Carolina, even though some people consider him to be more of a swing tackle, could play guard early on. Georgia's had a lot of success there. His older brother is a redshirt freshman defensive lineman in Athens right now, so the family really knows that. But there's a new name that's kind of emerged, and Georgia just offered him. He's quickly settled an official visit. And Kelly, I'm just going to read you straight from some text messages. It doesn't get any more.
He's bringing out the receipts.
It doesn't even get any more breaking news than this. We got a brand new studio. Let's do a brand new thing. Chancellor Campbell is 6'8" and a quarter. 303 pounds. He's got 86-inch reach. He's a prospect. He's only a 3-star, Kaylee, but does this sound like a 3-star? OV set to Georgia, Ohio State, Florida, and Penn State. This is what he says. He loves Georgia, love their program. Watching them practice and talk during meetings really shows me the reason they are such a prestigious program. And he says Georgia has a strong chance to land him. Official visit is set, so that's another name. Now, guys, I know he's not a 5-star. I get it. It's Georgia trying to find that gem, that diamond in the rough. But that's some new news.
With a name like Chancellor, I feel like you're guaranteed one more star.
I mean, so he's out of St. Petersburg, Florida, 3.5 GPA. Again, an 86-inch wingspan.
Crazy.
So that's the Dikembe Mutombo or Shaquille O'Neal plus 2 inches. That's basically about 6 inches, 5 inches longer arms than Jackson Cantwell. So that's some new news Georgia's looking at the tackle. There's also a guy named Wilson Zirer out of Raven Gap. That's the school where Bo Walker played last season. And another named Fletcher Turk, Georgia just offered at Hebron Christian, Kaylee. Think about this for a second. About a year ago, he was 6'4" and 210 pounds. Now he's 6'4" and 285. So he's been eating some protein. He's been eating some ham sandwiches and some peanut butter and jelly, and Mama's been feeding that kid. So he's a guy who's going to take his official to Georgia. Again, Georgia's trying to climb into the race with Fletcher right now. Fletcher seems like a Georgia Tech lean maybe right now. So tackle's going to be interesting because I think the loss of Cantwell means you have a loss of that impact, maybe early playing time starter, and then Georgia's going to kind of go that route where they think they've found something where nobody else was looking.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our quick 5. Coming up, we will do a scavenger hunt recap as well as a conversation about the 5-star edge, Isaiah Gibson, who is already a dog. But first, I want to remind you guys that obviously we're in this new studio. I just want to give a shout out to everyone behind the scenes, Cody Chapins and Jay Black, who have done such a wonderful job of putting this together. And we've got plenty of shows that take place in here, like Before the Hedges, Dog Nation Daily, On the Beat, Dog Nation at Large. But one of the things that we do is also breaking news shows. So anytime that a recruit makes a decision, typically Dog Nation goes live. And even though those aren't scheduled, a way that you can actually see those come up is by subscribing to our Dog Nation YouTube page. While you're at it, go ahead and give us a like. That way you can get notified anytime that we have breaking news, because we're kind of at that point over the summer where there's going to be a lot of last minute commitments, and we want you guys to be in the know about all things breaking news, all things recruitment. So make sure to subscribe to our Dog Nation YouTube page. Now, this past weekend was Georgia's infamous scavenger hunt. There were some notable names that were a part of the visitors list, including the linebacker Nick Abrams, who you mentioned earlier, as well as the athlete Ryan Mosley. Do you have an update on how the scavenger hunt went for those two?
Yeah, so if we're sitting there and we're sorting names where the arrow went up for Georgia coming out of the official visits, I think, heck, Ryan Mosley even told me, he said, hey, man, the arrow went up for Georgia. That's the school that I think Georgia would be the most likely school out there to sign. Alabama, Nebraska, South Carolina, Texas A&M. Those are the schools that he still has scheduled for official visits, but Kaylee, those guys in Athens, they're closers, and they're drinking their coffee. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, hey, Ryan, do you really need to take all these other official visits? He said he loved the dogs. He said Georgia feels like home. And I know if you're looking at your bingo card, when the kid says he loves Georgia, he says it feels like home. Ryan's also an in-state kid who used to rep a number 34 red and black jersey growing up in Little League. Certainly those are indicators or indicating that Georgia's in a good spot. Georgia would love for him to shut it down. His next official visit is Alabama, but I think Georgia did a lot. He said it was his best ever visit. He said it was best visit to Georgia. Loves a relationship with Kirby. He got to recreate a Young Thug and Gunna picture, video, viral album cover with T-Rob and James Cooley right there. So obviously that's something that we've never said on Before the Hedges before, recreation of an album cover or an album session, a recording session with Young Thug and Gunna. Another thing to think about is Nick Abrams II. He said, told me coming out of his official visit, the number one question Georgia had to ask was, can he thrive in Athens? And his answer was 100% yes. Guys, Nick Abrams, I think he would be a great linebacker in this class, period. Forget about Tyler Atkinson, and if he's like, the second silver medal here in the chase. Nick Abrams is a fantastic football player. I think I've talked to him a couple of times. He checks all those boxes off the field Georgia likes, besides the speed, besides the length. He's got Alabama involved, and that's kind of seen as Georgia's biggest competition. Also Oregon, also Michigan. He's going to take some officials, going to finish the circuit out, but he's going to commit on his birthday, July 16th, Kaylee. So Watch that one. Nick Abrams, I would say stock is way up there for those two guys after their official visits. One other name to think about, and it's going to be really one easy to remember, Tyson Bacon.
Yeah.
Former former Tennessee commitment out of Hoover High in Alabama. He plays for the Bucks. Only a 3-star, Kaylee. Again, we told you earlier about what the defensive line recruiting looks like in this class, but Georgia showed him a lot. I think there were good vibes coming out of that, and I think Georgia is in a not a great spot, but a good spot coming out of that official visit. And of course, he's got some more to take as well.
When we talked about this last week, one of the things that we didn't touch on, but it's never too early to start thinking about it, and I was kind of reminded of it because a lot of the ranking sites started releasing their top 100 or 200 for the class of 2027. Mm-hmm. Were there any 2027s who made the trip?
Yeah, everybody likes a quarterback, and everybody likes an in-state quarterback. How about Teddy Gerard of North Cobb? Georgia, they had the quarterbacks there in town for the scavenger hunt, and, one of the things nobody can ever accuse Mike Bobo of is that the scavenger hunt, somehow through some trickeration or sleight of hand, everybody always accuses the quarterbacks of cheating during the scavenger hunt. Ryan Mosley even said, hey, man, quarterbacks are always kind of geared to win that thing. But they won, and there was also Teddy Gerard there, but there was also Kareem Hughley. I know a guy that you've seen at Gainesville High School. Mm-hmm. He was also there. Georgia had two of its major 2027 targets in town. They're in state for the class of 2027. And Kaylee, let's just be real for a second. When you're following Jared Curtis, Georgia's not going to get another 5-star after him. So you're going to have to look in state. You're going to have to look for that mid-tier top 20 overall player at quarterback, top 20 overall prospect at quarterback. He was there. Also, LaDainian Guyton was there, the number 1 overall prospect. Now he's at Benedictine out of Savannah. He was there for Georgia this weekend. Also, DJ Jacobs, another 5-star out of Blessed Trinity, was also there. But there's also a young man by the name of Donovan Gabriel Georges. Now, Kaylee, he's in Chattanooga. He plays for the Baylor School. That's where Muschamp's kid played at. But the interesting thing for this guy is he's the number 3 running back in the country, and he just moved to Tennessee. He just moved from Tennessee from Quebec in Canada.
Oh.
Not often see a young man coming from Canada to, I guess, the foothills of southern Tennessee and Chattanooga for the Baylor School. But number 3 running back in the country took another visit to Georgia. I think the arrow's up for him there as well. But to have Jacobs in there, to have LaDainian Guyton, which would be Georgia's ideal edge class, to have both of those guys in there for the scavenger hunt. Both kids coming out of it felt great about Georgia, the way they were treated, the way they were felt like a priority. So Georgia is likely trying to sow some 2027 seeds right there, especially with Jacobs, the legacy edge.
What's crazy, too, is before you know it, we're going to look up there and we're going to be doing the 2027 top targets and just off the list. It's going to happen before we know it. So before we get to talking about Isaiah Gibson, obviously this is Before the Hedges that premieres every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, but make sure tomorrow to tune into Dog Nation Daily at 10 a.m. on whatever platform you watch on. You can watch myself and Connor Riley on Dog Nation at Large tomorrow night, where we're going to be talking about the 5 Georgia players who can help fit 2 major issues from last season. So you can tune in tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for Dog Nation at Large with myself and Connor. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I think it's just about time to do Next Generation on the 5-star Isaiah Gibson. So clearly we are not going to be able to hit on everyone in the 2025 class, but when you've got a top 100 player that you haven't talked about yet, he's got to come up in this Next Generation series. So today we're focusing on all things 5-star edge Isaiah Gibson. We'll show you his player card on the screen here. Everybody loves an in-state kid, especially out of Warner Robins, where you know they play hard-nosed football. 6'4", 255. He's an edge. Overall rank of the 2025 class, number 14, and the number 1 edge. And here's the thing. When you've got the number 1 edge prospect, it clearly says something about you has to stand out. So what is it about Isaiah Gibson that all these sites said, yeah, that's the number 1 edge?
Well, first of all, Kaylee, he's a big dude, and actually some of those national sites that report his weight, they're a little behind the times. He's every bit of 270, kind of finished his senior year around 270. And Kaylee, he's just nasty. That's the way I can describe him. Like every time I saw him in a scrimmage or in a game, he was playing almost where he was out of control. Like, and I mean that in a good way. His hair was on fire, great motor. But the other thing there was like a lot of guys were like, he was pursuing the ball carrier. I'll never forget a story. I went to a jamboree scrimmage this past summer, and saw Isaiah Gibson. And the other team, you know, you have your ones in there, right? And the other team's coaches saw Isaiah blow up like 3-4 plays in a row. And they're basically like, when the coach said, all right, that's enough, let's get the 2s in there. The other team was clapping because they're like, all right, good job, coach. Let's get those 2s in there so we can actually try to run a play. Like he was that dynamic. He was just so unblockable right there. And of course, he's a 5-star. Yes, he was once committed to USC. Let's all tip our cap to that annual rite of spring when a guy that was committed to USC from the state of Georgia, that recruitment wilts in the heat of May, not just June or July. But Warner Robins guy, he's been a guy that's played a lot. I love the story we're going to get into a little bit about his mother, Candace Gibson, who is a captain in the Army. That mother does not play. She was a Division I dynamic basketball player in her own right there. And, you know, Isaiah's a guy that I think he might eventually kick inside, just be an ideal 5-tech rather than be that edge pass rusher playing out there in space a lot with his hand off the ground.
You mentioned the recruiting process because it was not easy for the Dogs, but in the end, they ended up getting him. So what was it about Georgia that made Isaiah Gibson flip?
So he wants to be, I'm going to stress this word, development. And Kaylee, there were reports out there, which I kind of do take stock in, that somebody came late at Isaiah Gibson with a big number, and Isaiah Gibson didn't flinch on that. The thing to remember about Isaiah is he was always looking for development. His mother, Candace, told me a story. I believe they're in a golf cart at USC. They're watching USC practice, and they'd been to see Georgia practice a lot. And Mom actually said, Isaiah, watch them. Look how they practice. They don't go hard. They're not acting like dogs out here. Like, you know, and I both know, referring to Georgia, what a tough physical football practice looks like. And she's like, this ain't it. And when they face a team like Georgia that practices knocking guys in the dirt, knocking stuff in the dirt every day, like it's every day that ends in Y, they're going to wilt and they're going to fold and they're not going to be able to compete. And she's like, Isaiah, they don't have it here, what they see at Georgia. What you and I know there is at Georgia. And that's one of those things that kind of triggered the decommitment, is they know how Georgia worked. They know how Georgia practiced, and they compared that to USC. It wasn't even a comparison.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring this up, because you had the chance to catch up with Isaiah Gibson right before he signed with Georgia, and this is what he had to say about Georgia practice.
Honestly, I've seen like almost every school practice in a way, but I've never seen a practice more physical than Georgia's practice. Coach Smart, you can hear him over the loudspeaker from probably a mile away. And the physicality that everyone plays with, the intensity, in my opinion, is unmatched in any other school. So, yeah.
And this was someone who went and visited a lot of schools because he was such a high caliber player. And as you brought up, like, I think that the development was ultimately so important for him, because this was a guy that could have gone anywhere he wanted for just about any amount of money. So the fact that he's talking about the physicality of practice and the development, I think it shows you that was one of his top priorities.
So obviously, Kaylee, he comes from a school that's in the heart of Bulldog country. Mm-hmm. It's funny, the trainer is also the English teacher at Warner Robins High School, and she's a diehard dog. Her name's Annabelle. She was like, listen, ain't no way we're going to let him go anywhere else besides Georgia. She was always going to be in his ear. But we referenced his mother, Candace. I got one more story about his mother. And you love it when this young man is backed up by a strong family circle and a strong family dynamic. She told Isaiah that once he settled on his school and once he signed, she's like, there's no transfer portal. She said, now, listen, I'm not naive, guys. If something happens with maybe his position coach or Coach Deribe, or somebody throws $4 million at him, we know the world can spin and world can turn. But I'm going to tell you that what this family believes in is, his mom told me, she said, Isaiah, if you're not playing, if you want to leave Georgia, we're going to walk through the reasons why. Number one, is it because you're not happy? Are you not happy because you're not playing? She's like, if you're not playing, what's the reason why you're not playing? She's like, because that sounds to me like that's an Isaiah Gibson problem and not a University of Georgia problem. You need to fix that problem and get on the field, and then these transfers will go out the wayside. And again, she says that not only as a very articulate, a very tough mother, but also, you know, she serves our nation. She serves our country. So when they use the word commitment, they don't throw that thing around like, you know, shuttlecocks in badminton or something like that. That means something to her. That means something. I'll never forget watching Candace. Never seen this before from a Georgia recruit's family at Sanford. When they played the Star Spangled Banner, Candace saluted through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that was like an iron salute and everything else like that. So I think the Gibson family has made up some pretty stern stuff. I think Isaiah has a bright future at Georgia. I mean, again, we've talked about this forever, Kaylee, but when Georgia can get Isaiah on the field with Isaiah Gibson, maybe you have Chase Linton at the edge. You also have Ellis Robinson on the field, KJ Bolden, Chris Cole, Justin Williams, Zayden Walker. Good luck, SEC, moving the ball. But, you know, Gibson's one of those guys we wanted to talk about. He's a middle Georgia dog. Georgia actually got 2 dogs out of Warner Robins in this previous class. Rayshawn Dinkins, we'll have to talk about him in a segment coming up in the future, because he's one of those 3 May enrollees, guys that didn't enroll during the summer, that will be able to basically tee up for everybody else as well.
So that's going to be our next generation, all about Isaiah Gibson. And now it's time to get into our class breakdown. We will start with the offensive side of the ball with, of course, it's now got Jared Curtis added onto the list, as well as the interior offensive lineman, the 4-star Graham Houston. Georgia's still on the hunt for another tight end, but right now they've got the 4-star Lincoln Keys. Now we'll move to the defensive side of the ball, where you've got 3-star defensive lineman Seven Cloud and 3 safeties between 4-star Zach Ford, as well as Keelan Jones and one of the class's newer commits, 4-star Jordan Smith. If you go to the class snapshot, the only thing that's different this week is they do drop in their class rank from 12 to 14, but that's a lot of this right now is more so quantity over quality because people are just trying to stockpile their recruiting classes. So they do make that drop, but nothing to be concerned or dramatic about. Now we go to the top targets, and there's going to be some movement on this week. There's 2 players I want to focus on here on this first slide, and those are the 2 defensive linemen. I think it's interesting that now all of this is happening with Seven Cloud, and the 4-star defensive lineman J.J. Johnson actually drops like 5 or 6 spots on the list. And with the Seven Cloud stuff, I think now the recruitment of the 4-star defensive lineman Ernest Rankings becomes that much more important.
Yeah, Ernest just took an official visit to Auburn this past weekend, Kaylee, but I'll give you a little insight. The reason why J.J. Johnson, who basically had Georgia as his leader most of the early spring, is that this is becoming known to me that this is going to be an NIL recruitment. He's in Miami. He's at a school that really favors and sends a lot of its players to Coral Gables, and I think this is going to be an NIL recruitment. So obviously that's something that, again, it looks like Georgia's kind of taking all comers with all the players it wants, with identifying players it really likes and making them feel like a priority, and then others will swoop in and see what Georgia's doing there. But again, defensive line, Kaylee, the rubric for Georgia at defensive line that doesn't include Seven Cloud gets kind of complicated. Another name I want to throw attention to here is I think he's a little too low, but I think Craig Dandridge is probably the hottest rising prospect in the state of Georgia. Georgia would love to have him. I think they would do the Icky Shuffle all the way up and down Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall. If you young folks don't know what that means, go to YouTube. You'll figure it out. But I think Georgia would be abundantly pleased if they could sign Craig Dandridge, a guy that checks every box. He's getting a lot of big-time recruitment. Tennessee likes him. Tech likes him. Stanford likes him. A lot of schools like him. Georgia likes him, and he's out of Cambridge in Milton, Georgia, and he had a bonkers junior season as well.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our next page of just off the list. This is where you're really going to start to see some movement. You've got the 4-star offensive tackle, Ekene Ogboko, who moves up. And then Tyreek Green and Peyton Dyer essentially just switch places. But Tyreek Green was somebody that was on the rise for a really long time. So why the switch between him and the 4-star cornerback, Peyton Dyer?
I think Tyreek's a really great football player, but I just, Kaylee, this is just a simple thing like we talk about with our top targets. Sometimes it's based on need, and Tyreek's a guy that would play nickel, would play the star, and could also play some safety. And I think Georgia, I mean, they're pursuing 2 or 3 more safeties besides Tyreek Green. There's a lot of other names they're going after there as well. I think Peyton Dyer is Georgia's best chance to sign a physical, SEC-ready cornerback in this class of 2026, and he really likes the Dogs, and the Dogs are making him feel like a priority.
All right, so now we'll move on to the top 5 who had no changes for this week. Is it one of those situations where it's basically just going to be Mark Bowman at number 1 until he makes the decision, or is there any chance that somebody like Tyler Atkinson or even Ryan Mosley moves up? I
think Mark Bowman is going to be at number 1 now, even if he makes a decision somewhere else. So if he's committed to Texas or Oregon or somewhere else, I think Georgia, I still put him there because I think that's the remaining priority in the class, especially when finances are involved. I mean, Tyler's a guy that, again, if Georgia didn't have Zayden Walker, I think it would be a little bit more contested. But those 2 guys are really close in terms of the biggest remaining pieces of the class. I just think Georgia's going to have a lot of the race for Atkinson becomes a lot more competitive, and the race for Bowman has always been competitive. One name I think everybody is sleeping on a lot is Kamari Brooks. Kamari Brooks was also at the Scavenger Hunt as an unofficial visitor. He's going to be back at Georgia on May the 30th for his official visit there as well. Kamari's a guy that he's going to take umpteen visits to Georgia, and that's really boiling down to just an Alabama or Georgia recruiting race right there.
All right, now we will move on to our just off the list. You spoke about him earlier. I was going to ask. Now you've got the 3-star offensive tackle, Chancellor Campbell from St. Petersburg, Florida, who's in the mix. I know he's only a 3-star, but I think I told you earlier, with a name like that, you're probably going to get the bump up at some point.
Love the alliteration, and if he commits to Georgia, Kaylee, we can go ahead and write it down, that, or even Ohio State, that he's going to become a 4-star just by that Buckeye bump or that Bulldog bump. Nick Abrams is a guy that I really seriously thought about moving him up into the top targets. If I had to put it down right now, I might even make a Nick Abrams, move him onto the top targets list, and also move James J.J. Johnson off. Carson Baker's a guy that you look at with Georgia. If Georgia misses on Hyder, Georgia misses on Lamar, Georgia misses on Derek Cooper, then obviously he becomes maybe the top guy on Georgia's board undisputably at running back as well. So, again, we mentioned Cooper a lot. Cooper, you hear Miami is really going to try and take another W against the Dogs this year in a head-to-head race.
Feels personal.
Trying to take another great player out of Georgia and maybe protect their borders a little bit.
All right, so we'll move on to our next page of just off the list. We've got a new name, 4-star wide receiver Terrius Favors out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Kaylee, one of those things we could have included on our storylines for this remaining storylines of this class is class retention. And it's not only just about Seven Cloud, it's also about Vance Spafford. And if Vance Spafford, Miami's coming after him, Washington's coming after him as well. I think if they pull the flip or the bidding gets a little too high for Vance, I think Georgia likes what it sees in Terrius Favors. The guy's got ridiculous film. He plays for Carver, Atlanta. He makes plays. Electric is the word when you watch his film. We're going to go see him in the next couple of weeks or maybe in the next couple of days. But Terrius is a guy that was originally ranked as a corner, but now is seen more as an athlete. But for Georgia, he'd be a wide receiver, especially a slot guy. The one consideration there, Kaylee, is I think he's probably about 5'11" and about 165, 170, so he's going to have to put on a little weight before he would play in the SEC.
All right, now let's move on to our next page. 2 new names. You've got Savion Griffin Haynes. I just couldn't fit it all onto the slide. And then you're really good with pronunciation, so I'm going to let you go with Breck's last name. But I did notice Bradenton, Florida. Anytime you see Bradenton, Florida, you immediately think IMG. You immediately think next level ready.
Kelly, I think you would fall out of your chair if I would have said that's from Bradenton High School. There's no such thing as Bradenton High School. That guy is at IMG.
Yeah.
IMGA is what we like to say on this program because it seems like a lot of dogs come out of there. Breck's an interior offensive lineman. I think if Georgia could snap its fingers and Stacey Searles could snap his fingers and say, these are my ideal 5 linemen in this class, I think Breck would be one of those ideal 5 linemen. Oklahoma really wants him. A lot of schools really want him. He's going to take his official visit in June as well. We mentioned Kenneth Goodwin earlier. He's a guy that Georgia really likes in a very shallow pool at linebacker for this class.
All right, we've got one more page just off the list for you. You brought up Shadarius Tootle earlier. Do we have an update on the 5-star edge, Drake Quinn?
Yeah, so Drake Quinn actually has condensed his recruitment down to a final 6. You hear Texas, you hear Georgia, you hear Georgia Tech, and you hear Alabama with Drake Quinn as well out of Greater Atlanta Christian. Coach Uzo Duribe, Georgia's outstanding edge coach, went and saw him recently during spring practice. And again, we mentioned Tootle earlier, currently committed to Auburn, but it sounds like Georgia is his number 1 school. He's out of Mobile, Alabama. Lots of schools are still coming in trying to get him. Baylor, a lot of schools all over the grid are trying to flip Shadarius from the Auburn Tigers. You always kind of wonder about the chances of that because, listen, he's in the state of Alabama. He's in the 251 in Mobile. It's always very hard to pull players out of that state.
All right, so that's going to wrap up today's episode of Before the Hedges, our first show together in the new studio. So thank you all so much for tuning in on tonight's episode. We will see you right back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Let's go, I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking. I love the family atmosphere.